Guys, I want you all to stand up. I want you to turn to one of the guys next to you or behind you and just take a minute, look them in the eye, and just tell them they're forgiven. You're forgiven. And say it back. God forgives you too.
Yeah.
Give them a hug, shake their hand.
In AC3, when I walked in there the first time, I was looking at the pegboard with all the breakout groups.
Oh, yeah.
I was like literally shaking, just like Josh was talking. I get this shoulder, turn around.
Yeah, he's stalking everybody.
James is everywhere. James Berg is everywhere. All right, so in continuing with the kind of the theme of testimony, I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story. So we've kind of unpacked the idea of coming out swinging. Fighting, we've talked about the idea of retreating. We're going to talk about now what I think is maybe the most insidious, and that's assimilation. And that's we can just kind of lose ourselves into the culture we've been called to fight against. So this was probably 15 years ago. I was in the process of my seminary studies through correspondence school. And both our ordaining body, we're in the same ordaining body, is what's called an abstinence body. So they require us as ordained ministers not to consume alcohol. We both happen to, it's a disputable matter. I might feel differently about that. I don't think it's a big deal. I think a Christian should be able to drink, but they feel strongly that they shouldn't. I'm not going to argue with you. It's fine. I don't need to drink. No big deal. So I get a call from a friend of mine, and again, it's about 15 years ago. And he's going through a really rough time. Marriage is coming apart. And he was an evangelical rock star.
Yep.
This kid grew up in Christian school. He dated his youth group darling. They got married. He went and worked for an enormous megachurch back in the Midwest. He was a staff member there. He moved out here. Career in evangelicalism, and his whole life has fallen apart under him. The whole thing's collapsing, and he's having questions about whether he even wants to follow Jesus now. It's a really big deal. And so I have a very different story. Mine looks more like Josh's than it did, my friend, right? I've kind of been around the block a couple of times. I constantly get accused of corrupting him by his wife, which is not true. He comes up with most of this stuff on his own.
I learned all my swears from you.
He learned all his swears. Ooh, he said a swear. That's how John sounds. Why did you teach him that? I didn't teach him that one. Taught him some other ones. Anyway, so I got this background. My friend, we'll call him Tom, has this very other background. And this was, when did the iPhone come out? 2007. Nerd. Yeah, nerd. Yeah, thank you, nerd. Yeah. Okay, great. So this would have been 2007, 2008, because he has this new iPhone, and on it, there's a bartending app. This guy's discovered alcohol this year. He's like really into it, and he's looking at wine, and he's had a couple of cocktails. And again, he's on the off-ramp to trouble. So we get together, we go see a band we like, we're having dinner afterwards, and he's kind of unloading all this stuff, and he's like, oh, look at this iPhone, I got the app. Have you ever had a Manhattan? I'm like, yeah, I've had a Manhattan. And I've had a couple. And he goes, well, let's have a drink. And I said, oh, sorry, man, I signed this agreement. I can't drink because of... And he goes, really? Yeah, and that's the deal. He goes, oh, yeah, I've heard of them, and blah, 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 blah. And so we talk a little bit more, and he watches the waitress go by, and then he looks at me, and he goes, so you won't drink with me? All right, I'll have a drink with you. So I take him to the whiskey bar. We're downtown Seattle. And let me show you how to drink. So let me teach you how to do this properly. Top shelf, bartender, top shelf. So we have a couple drinks. Don't get lit up or anything. I good. And then I can't sleep. I can't sleep for 2 days because I broke my word. And so I went to him and I said, hey, dude, I drank. He's like, oh, wow, okay, whatever. Well, and I said, I sent an email to our denomination and just confessed. And he said, well, good job, appreciate that. And he goes, I don't care if you drink, but I care that you keep your word. Yeah, I know. So anyway, I confessed, and he goes, well, and I remember he goes, let's just hope that they want to hear your story. So I get a call about an hour later from my faculty advisor or whatever. He goes, hey, he wrote me back. He said, got your email, and I forwarded it on to the president of the denomination who handles all our discipline. So this organization is like the only legitimate Christian organization that would probably take me, because I don't have the pedigree, right? So if I screw this, it's like I'm done. I'm not going to be ordained. So I get a call from this guy later this afternoon. Hi, Dan. This is Sam Goebel. And he's got this voice. I can hear his haircut. Right? You know, this guy's been preaching for a while. Hello, Dan. This kind of thing. And I'm like, oh, no. I am so screwed. And then the next thing out of his mouth is, he goes, so tell me what happened. Tell me the story. And so I tell him the story. And I go, so Sam, you know what it's like when your buddy looks at you and says, you won't drink with me? And he goes, well, Dan, I can't tell you that I do. Because he is his haircut. Anyway, so he goes, I met him later. Amazing man. He was there at my ordination a couple years after that. And he says, well, let me explain to you why we have the policy we do. And he goes through the reasoning. And I'm like, yes, sir, I've studied the Bible. I know your reasons. I don't agree with them. And he goes, well, can you stick with this? I said, yes, sir, I can. He goes, well, I consider this case closed then. He said, and he just encouraged me. He said, thank you. You didn't have to tell us, but you're a man of integrity. And those are the kind of men we want. And it's good for you. And he encouraged me. And then he prayed for me. And I've never been prayed for. Is it Psalm 133, the oil?
Yes.
Psalm 133, the oil of blessing onto Aaron's head, and it pours down into his beard and onto the ephod. I felt this blessing coming out of the phone. Oh, it was just amazing. And I got rewarded for this. I got rewarded for confessing. But that was the corrective to what I had done earlier, which is I had assimilated. I had without thinking just absolutely surrendered to the context that I found myself in, which is, well, you got to drink with your buddy. Well, I don't do that anymore. For various reasons. I gave my word to brothers. Like, I'm not going to do this, but I just caved into it. I assimilated almost without thinking about it. And I'm just grateful to the Holy Spirit. I'm grateful to God's faithfulness that he kept me up for 2 days after that and just reminded me, it's like, this isn't who you are. This is not who you are. And that's what we call Dan's drinking problem.
Yeah. Well, and it just underlines that the Bible comes back to this idea over and over again that we're strangers.
Yes.
So why do we find ourselves surprised when we feel like strangers,
Absolutely.
Right? It's like, I don't feel like I fit in here. Well, that's actually part of the plan.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's actually part of the plan.
What I said is if you're not angry and depressed, you're not in exile.
Yeah.
And if you're not in exile, you're at home. If you're not angry and depressed because you don't fit in, then you're not in exile. And if you're not in exile, you're home. Where do you want to be home?
Mm-hmm. So Scripture says, 1 Peter 2:11, dear friends, you are like foreigners and strangers in this world. I beg you to avoid the evil things your bodies want to do that fight against your soul. And again, the same idea, different author, Hebrews 11:13. All these people, talking about all these faith heroes, still living by faith when they died, they did not receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, admitting that they were foreigners and strangers on earth. So that's just part of the gig, right? We're going to follow a Jesus not of this world. That's going to be the way we are. So assimilation happens when we feel two things. When we're done fighting because we feel like fighting doesn't do any good, and there's no place to retreat to. So think about that. You could be in the fight, your initial reaction, fight! Oh, that's not working. Run! There's no place.
To run.
Well, I guess I'll join you. Right? It's a very logical next step. And so that's the third response to the where we are. This context we've been talking about all weekend long. This place of destabilization, this place of exile, this place of marginalization. Well, fight, that's not working. Run away. There's no place to go. I guess I'm going to join them. I guess I'll join
And we're going to tell an example of what this looks like because it's more insidious than you just initially think.
Yeah.
Right? Just joining them. Let's
Right,
talk about
exactly.
let's talk about the Black Sox.
Yeah, so it's 1919. Some of you baseball nerds understand this one. Before their World Series against the Chicago or Cleveland Indians, 8 Chicago White Sox players met secretly with a gambling bookie in a local hotel. For $5,000 each, this is in 1919, so that's about $50,000 or about $100,000 in today's money. The bookie would pay these conspirators to throw the World Series. We say take a dive.
Take a dive.
Throw the game. Throw the series, right? So the lead conspirator, first baseman Arnold Gandil, would make $500,000 in today's money. He was basically the ringleader who rounded up enough guys to make it work. Because one guy's not going to make it work, right? One guy plays, falls on his face for the series. He throws the game. Doesn't matter. You got to get enough guys, enough starters. So the fix was in. H.U.G.E, the shortstop, went on to commit 4 errors in 8 games. It was Little League. Whenever the ball came to shortstop, it was like,
between his legs.
through my legs. Lefty Williams went 0 for 3 in the World Series. Can you imagine losing 3 games in a World Series? And
what was his ERA?
He was an all-star. His ERA was 6.63, Dan,
I'm not even a
World
sports
Series.
guy, and I know that sucks.
Yeah. Gandil, by the way, the only guy to ever do that, only guy to ever lose. That was back when it was a 9-game series, by the way. So he lost 3 games in a World Series. Gandil was awful at first base. They lost the series, and all 8 players were banned for life. So here's the question. If you're in a fight in professional sports, because that's what a sporting match is, it's something of a fight, right? So if you're in a fight in professional sports and you take a dive, you throw the game, what are you actually doing? You're actually joining your enemy.
Right? So the White Sox, those 8 White Sox were actually playing for the Cleveland Indians.
Yeah. And there's a great example of it. So game 5, and one of the Cleveland Indians hits a stinger down the left field line. And Shoeless Joe Jackson, which, by the way, any baseball nerds here, like you're part, okay. So you're part of the, was he guilty or not? Was he part of the 8? What's your opinion? Okay, he's clean. Well, this play is going to kind of go to that point. So Joe picks up this stinger. There was a guy on second base. He's rounding third, coming home, and Joe fires a BB home. He comes up firing. It's a BB. He's going to get the guy at home base. It's going to keep the game close. They can win this game. First baseman Gandil calls for the pitcher. It's H.U.G.E, another one of the conspirators. Cut it off! Cut it off! And he does. Cuts it off. So, at the moment that the ball is being cut off, the ball that will surely peg the guy at home base, who is Gandil and H.U.G.E playing for? They're playing for the Indians.
The Indians.
At that moment, they're playing for the Indians. And men, that's assimilation. Assimilation is when, for your own gain, you join the enemy. For your own gain. And what would be the gain? You're getting something out of it, of joining the enemy. So some of us stuck in this context, let's say it again, marginalization, being called bigots and phobes, being displaced and mocked, choose not to fight and not to retreat. Instead, we choose this third option. We choose to assimilate. Why? What's the kickback? What are we getting out of it? The Black Sox got money. And by the way, they were super embittered, weren't they, apparently, against their owner?
Yeah, it was
there was
Charles
no players union.
Kaminsky. Yeah,
Kaminsky, they hated that guy.
That's part of why they did it.
They were going to stick it to him.
So let's get him.
Yep, exactly. So what was their kickback? Some vengeance on their owner. What's your kickback? What's your kickback to assimilate when the temptation is on? Peace, right? That's got to be one of the biggest, right? Peace. Who doesn't get tired of being called an outsider? Getting along with family members. How many of you, we stood up on Friday night when we identified this way. How many of you had a family member, close friend, somebody that you know in your circle who's left the faith in the last 3 years? Look around the room. This is like easily 40%. So if they're really close to you, peace calls you to maybe just say, hey, you get caught up in the wake of their leaving. You want to identify with them. You don't want to become that guy who gets defensive, and you want to be the open-minded person who understands their reasons for leaving. And you get, Dan mentioned this week, he said, you get caught up in the slipstream behind them on their way out. Feeling like you belong is a kickback for assimilation. Feeling like you're smart, like you understand those objections to the Christian faith. And so you start to kind of say, I don't want to be lumped in with the dumb people, the know-nothing,
knuckle-dragging, superstitious,
the anti-science
haters.
Christians. Yeah, I don't want to be part of that whole crowd. You want to feel like you're progressive, that you're informed on the issues. Who wants to feel dumb, behind the times, unscientific, and superstitious? Nobody. So there's a great benefit to assimilation. And so what we do what the Black Sox players did. We assimilate, we join the other side. We give up our cherished otherness, the strangeness, our cherished strangeness. What's this quote here, Dan? You brought this to my attention by Peter Gord on this issue. This is incredible.
Great author, and he says this: not only physics teaches that a mass is prone to inertia, again and again among Christians as well, one finds the effort to settle down in this world and to have it good. Just how can it, right? I mean, I just want to live my life quietly, and just please don't make things more complicated for me. Can't we all just get along?
Yeah. There is real stranger fatigue in the church these days.
Yeah.
There's stranger fatigue. I am tired of feeling like a stranger. Some of us get juice out of it, right? Some of us, even in this room, you're getting juice out of the fact that I'm a stranger. Yeah, man. Love the idea that you're the you're an outsider to the cultural milieu, but that's not everybody. And if you just love conflict for conflict's sake, I got a few names of some counselors to show you, because that's not always healthy. But so we have a natural inclination to not want to be locked in conflict, right? So let's go to the scripture. And again, guys, we were just blown away, Dan and I were, as we're preparing for this. Every exile illustrates everything here. And so in exile again, Daniel chapter 3. If you want to look on your device or your Bible, that's where we're going to go. So Daniel and his three friends, what are their names? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They find themselves in exile. They've been transplanted. They're part of the elites, by the way. The elites got absconded with from Jerusalem into Babylon. And so they've been transplanted from a friendly place, a place that agrees with all of their religious presuppositions, to one that's hostile to them, right? Babylon. Their devotion to Yahweh comes right up against the establishment cultural religion. And it really comes to a head when Nebuchadnezzar does this crazy thing, which wasn't crazy to him at all, because someone was talking in his ear, "Oh, great emperor, you should set up an edifice to your greatness." So he does. He sets up a 90-foot tall idol that looks like him. Wow, megalomaniac much. And so this 90-foot tall statue, and here's what he does. He commands everyone to worship it. And that doesn't seem strange to Babylonians at all. But here's how it goes down. This is Daniel chapter 3. Then the herald loudly proclaimed, this is by the edict of Nebuchadnezzar, nations and peoples of every language. Because remember, it's an empire. It spans countries now. Nebuchadnezzar rules the then known world. Nations and peoples of every language, this is what you are commanded to do. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace. Okay, so if we're right that exile is the biblical context that fits our context the best, right? Then for some of you men, the response to exile, to marginalization, to being the religious minority, will not be to fight for some idealized past. And it will not be to retreat to some safe ghetto with a bunch of Christians who think like you. Instead, the temptation for you is going to be to bow to the idols, to go along with the crowd. That's going to be the real temptation for you, to assimilate. Now, for these three young Jewish transplants, that is not how they react. The whole nation bows, but they don't. And we sing songs about these three guys.
We have flannel
in the
graphs
church. We have
for the
flannel
kids.
graphs, so we teach the 6-year-olds about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And of course, this does not escape the notice of others. So they stand out. They're strangers. They're foreigners. And this utterly stands out. They stand out as very strange. But notice, people can't just let you be strange. And that's, again, a pressure for assimilation. Hey, man, if we could just stand apart from the culture and be strange, to be foreigners the way we're called to be, following our out-of-this-world master, then hey, more power to us. That's not okay. Not in our context and not in theirs. People are not just happy to let you be strange. Strange threatens them. So the three nonconformists get reported on. So I want you to hear the next few verses in the voice of your favorite tattletale from your childhood. Did you have one? Who was it for you?
Steve Smith.
My sister. Oh, she told on me all the time. Your brother? You're being called out. Can't look. Okay.
There's one right there.
Okay. So
there he is.
So we're going to read it in this voice. Is this you, Nolan, when you're 6? Okay. Okay. There are some Jews whom you have set, O great Nebuchadnezzar, over the affairs of the promise of Babylon. Let me name them. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who pay no attention to you, your majesty. They neither serve your gods nor worship the image of gold you have set up. Okay? They get told on. Yeah. It's like they're being told on by tattletales. You will get reported on. It's not okay to be strange. Friends, some of you have already started to live this, right? Big brother is going to report on you. Give the appropriate salute. Say the right line. Check the right box, or you will be reported on. For how many of you, we're talking in generalities, don't shout out specifics. I don't need to throw a company under the bus. How many of you experienced anything like that? Yeah. Yeah, you've got to toe a line. You've got to toe a line that you don't want to toe. So friends, this is corporate America is now in the thrall of a new religion. And we all know about surveillance capitalism. We are being watched. Big Brother is watching you to report on infractions against the idols. Just like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They're ready to report on you. And you say, well, what would those idols be? Well, we could talk about it in all sorts of ways. Certainly, there is an altar, I think, that's labeled diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's a new idol. You must bow down to them. Now, listen, those words are actually awesome. And before they become a pariah, let's pull them aside and say, diversity is an incredibly cool value for a Christian. Think about it. We're part of the community that here there's no barbarian, Scythian, slave or free, Jew or Gentile, for you are all one in Christ. We have an intellectual basis for a multiracial, multinational, multi-ethnic cadre community of every tribe, every tongue. We got the resources for that, man. It's in the gospel. Same thing with this other word, equity. Equality, man. We also level ground in front of the cross. Everybody's a son or daughter of Adam and Eve. We are all valuable, made in the image of God. Equality. And then inclusion. Man alive, our gospel throws the doors open. Come on, get included in the family of God. So on paper, man, those are great words. But as idols, the words have become like reversey world. And they mean the exact opposite of what they mean in Webster's. So diversity has come to mean, in some cases, no diversity of opinion. That's what it means. We will enforce no diversity of opinion. You can't have a different opinion in many schools or workplaces or government institutions on sexuality, on human life, or religion. There's no diversity allowed on that stuff. Equity has come to mean, in some cases, treating people unequally to create equal outcomes because all differences in outcomes are deemed to be bad. Inclusion has come to mean excluding people who have unapproved viewpoints on sexuality, immigration, abortion, religion. Take your pick.
Have you noticed the great example of this is the Academy Awards?
Yes.
This will be the first year that the award for Best Picture will not be awarded to the Best Picture. It will be awarded to the Best Picture who was made by people who have a certain ethnicity. No, you have to meet a certain ethnic standard in your crew or you're not considered for Best Picture. It's Hollywood, and they do everything else right. So I don't know. Guys, it's the 90-foot statue. It's the idol of our times, and they will report on you if you don't bow. Oh, Nebuchadnezzar, the people you have put over your affairs.
have disobeyed your command to bow down to the idol. You didn't endorse the company's stance on marriage. You didn't discriminate against that employee or student on the basis of skin color the way we told you to. You didn't repeat the talking point that all religions are equally true. You didn't take on the approved views on the vax. You didn't take on the approved views on the environment. You didn't take on the approved views of sexuality. You didn't affirm your child's sexual confusion in the way the gods demanded. You will be reported on. You will be reported on. And it's here, men, that we face the withering pressure to assimilate. Just toe the party line. Say what Big Brother wants you to say. And you'll get off good. What does the quote say? You'll have it good. You'll live the good life.
You'll be, and I think it's important to say too that the biggest idol that's currently, I think, arguably being erected in our culture is this kind of DEI thing. But let's face it too. From the political opposite spectrum, there are certain things in other settings you can't say.
Yeah.
Right? There are certain color hats you have to wear, or you're not in. There are certain things that you've got to participate in, or you're on the outs. So it goes back to that idea, right, we talked about earlier. Assimilation is you have to watch for it, because when you start adopting the tactics of your enemy,
yeah,
right, you may have the opposite ideology. But if you're using the same tactics, you're on the slippery slope to assimilation.
Yeah.
So it's not just your political opponents. It's happening everywhere.
Think about this, what Dan just said. It's not just that assimilation is the temptation to embrace the ideology of the empire. It's that you are called to embrace the tactics of the empire. So think about this, guys. You think, well, this is not a deal for me, Rick. This is not a talk for me, because I am so solid on my ideology. There is one God, Jesus Christ, His Son. I'm bought in on following Him all the way to the cross. You know, like Peter, you'll say, I will never deny you, and all that kind of stuff. You're in on that. But I'm asking if maybe you've assimilated in the terms of tactics. And then you've taken on your enemy's tactics. Friend, you've assimilated even if you think you haven't assimilated ideologically. What does that look like? Well, like, look, you might think, well, I'm not assimilating, but when you become a jerk at work, the Bible thumper, the annoying guy who just is drilling people, you've taken on the enemy's tactics. You might still be assimilating by your belligerent responses to Christian bigotry. Did you hear what I just said? You're a victim of Christian bigotry, and you get belligerent. And so in that sense, you've actually taken on that's not your tactic. You know how I know? Because Jesus said, love your enemy. Do good to those who hate you. Pray for those who abuse you. Turn the other cheek. That's your tactics. But you return evil for evil? What credit is that to you? That's not your tactic. But you've assimilated because you say, I'm pure in my ideology, Rick. Maybe so. But you bought into the enemy's tactics. And you assimilated all the way.
Think about your favorite war movie. And right? And if it's done well, right? The bad guys, whoever it's the Nazis or the whatever, or go Star Wars, go whatever. The bad guys cheat, right? The bad guys are mean, and right, the good movie making means they wear black and they have the wrong hats and they kick you when you're down and all that other stuff. And when does your stomach start to turn over? It's when the good guys are tempted to behave in the same way.
Yeah.
Right, and we feel bad if they give in. We feel good when they say nope. I am not going to give up who I'm called to be. I'm not going to behave like the bad guys. They don't change their ideologies. They're still, the Empire's still the Empire, and this is still the rebel force. But if Luke Skywalker were to run some guy down with his lightsaber, we would like, Luke, what happened to you?
The ends were good.
You assimilated is what you did.
Yeah.
You became that's what, the whole Anakin Skywalker, that's how you get, do you want Darth Vader? This is how you get Darth Vader.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Is you assimilate. Mm-hmm. You assimilate.
Yeah. When we're not gentle, men, we've assimilated.
Yeah.
When we're not respectful with people who don't think like us, we've assimilated. When we're not doing good to people who hate us, we're assimilating. You've already lost the game, guys. How? By joining the other side. How? By bowing to the idol. Not by taking on the ideas, but by taking on the tactics. All right, so let's keep going in the story. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego do not bow. And what happens? They are prepared to pay a cost for that. So must you. The furnace awaits them, right? So the king basically gives them a chance to say, any last words, right, before they get chucked in the fiery furnace. And this is what they say. Let's keep reading. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him. This is in front of the furnace. Like literally, they're feeling the heat. King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to note, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. So they know they're going to face consequences for not assimilating, right? But they believe God can deliver, just as he promised he would deliver the people if they didn't retreat to Egypt. If they just stayed, I'll deliver you. I'll make Nebuchadnezzar friendly to you. Just stay. Don't retreat to your ghetto. Same promise. But their commitment to being strange is so sure and so certain, even if they, what do they say? Even if he does not, even if he doesn't deliver, they know, I belong to another kingdom. And it's because I belong to another king. And I want you to notice the tone of respect in their voices. They look at this guy ready to kill them for his own religious bigotry, and they say, your majesty. Twice. Your majesty. Deference. Respect. They're not proud. They're not angry. They're different and strange. Not just in their ideology. They are different in their ideology. They believe in the worship of one true creator God, Yahweh, the great I am. And they're not giving up on that. Not under threat of death. They're not giving up on that. But friends, they're also different in their ideology, in their tactics. Guys, it's the pagans that when you don't do it their way, want to throw you in the furnace. That's a pagan move. It's the pagans that deploy the thought police. He has unapproved opinions. He must be stoned. That's a pagan response. He has unapproved opinions. Shame on him on social media. Throw him into the social furnace. Keep him from having a job. Financially execute him. That's a pagan move. That's not a Christian move. It's the pagans that shut down debate and don't want to hear different ideas. Oh no, you hurt my ears. Right? That's a pagan move. Nebuchadnezzar, oh no, you didn't do what I said. Kill them. Off with their heads. Throw them in the furnace. It's pagans that strong arm. It's pagans that compel in matters of conscience and religion. And friends, I hope you notice that as I'm saying this, some Christians have done the very thing I'm saying. And that means they've assimilated. If a Christian strong arms, if a Christian engages in compelling in matters of conscience and religion, the Christian has assimilated to him. Yeah. Even though they keep their ideology pure, but their tactics.
And I think we also have to note too, Rick, right? So this freedom of speech and this freedom to express ideologies, this thing that Christians do, we know the origins of that, where it comes from Western thought, which is what? Christian thought.
Yeah, right.
Right, so the very reason we have it, and now that's being weaponized by somebody who wants to shut you down, is because this Christian ideal of saying, you matter. And I may not agree with you, but you're like, God loves you, and you can have a stupid opinion, James. I still love you. Yep. That's a Christian ideal.
Right.
And so now it's just been turned around and it's weaponized.
Yep, exactly. Well, Dan, talk about this because there's a great example. Dan, if you don't know, is a great admirer of the monastic. There's stuff we've lost in the evangelical tradition, devotion to solitude, the disciplines of the spiritual life. Also, this idea of creation being an access point to worship and intimacy with God. And we've been so afraid of the paganization inside. Anyhow, Dan, the monastic has kind of given us a bit of a path in this, haven't they?
Yeah.
And so talk about that for a little bit, like how to avoid assimilation and kind of walk that fine line.
Yeah, and then we're going to wrap this up with a time of prayer and opportunity for you all at the end of this. But so I like how Rick talked about we're strange. We're supposed to be strange. And the monastic, I'm part of a monastic order that's centered in the UK. And so we do strange things. We live life by a rule. We have a rule for life that I take a vow. We don't take a vow like the Benedictine monks did for life. They take a vow of poverty, chastity, and obedience. Well, I'm married, and I got to pay the bills, right? So, and I have a stupid haircut by choice, not because I have to. And I don't obviously have to wear a habit, but we have daily offices that we pray. So, so here's what the monastic does to make you strange. And interesting, where's Josh? Where did he go? Josh hit on this already in his story. 3-minute cold showers every day. You do hard things. You know, in the monastic tradition, you can't read a story at any point in Christian monasticism and find that they did sometimes some crazy stuff. I was telling the guys about Paul the Stylite. Everybody ever heard of him? Dude lived for decades on top of a 9-meter pole in Egypt, exposed to the air. You've also heard the stories of monks that whip themselves. Okay, I'm not recommending that. What I'm saying is that we do strange things. We take on hardship. We structure our lives around the purposes of God. The reason there are daily offices of prayer is because whatever else you're doing in your life is secondary to that. So you get up in the morning and there's a time where we come together and we say the office. I'm in my house. I've got hundreds of other people in my monastic order somewhere on the globe that are doing it too. We say we do this alone together. Then at midday we pause and we pray, and in evening and compline at night. And we watch how the earth travels around the sun, and God's got this amazing setup of seasons, and we see how he tells his story through that, and we acknowledge it. Rick talked about how we acknowledge the creation. And we engage in crazy things like solitude. Like I built a prayer hut in my yard. It's just a 10 by 10, man cave. But the only thing that goes on there is prayer. That's a place to be alone and to seek God's face. So I'm not saying everyone needs to take on monastic practices, but I am saying taking on monastic practices has had an impact on Christians for 2,000 years, from the very beginning. Because these are the things that separate us. Mm-hmm. We don't retreat. They're not tactics of slugging it out, and they're things that keep us at a distance from assimilating. No, I don't do this thing, I do this thing. It makes us weird. And we're supposed to be weird. Most of y'all already qualify, for the most part. So, we talked about tonight is an opportunity, right?
Yeah.
And wrapping up this part of it with assimilation, so every single one of us probably at some point over the last 24 hours or so have been confronted with the reality that one of these three things, or all of these three things, at some point very recently has snagged us. It's got our imagination. And we find ourselves pretty regularly, like I'm going to be honest, if I can confess, that coming out swinging thing, that is kind of owning me these days. I'm angry all the time. Is anybody else angry all the time? I'm angry all the time.
Right below the surface.
Right? Right? I'm putting a screw into a piece of furniture, it drops and rolls under the bench. Look out, man. It's just right there. Why? It's just right there all the time. I want to come out swinging. I don't drive much. One of the weird things I do is I walk or either ride my bicycle. Most places, I got to get a ride from him for this weekend. Right? When I do drive, how do you people do this all the time? They're idiots. Oh my gosh. Angry all the time. I want to come out swing. Every time I read the news. I don't have social media. You know why? I'm not grown up enough to have it.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. So maybe that's your thing too. Or maybe it's the retreat.
Yeah. It's just like, I want to get out of here. I want to get airlifted out of here. And there was people in Corinth that had that thought. And Paul said, listen, when I told you not to associate with people who are immoral and all, I meant kind of believers who are off the rails. You can't not associate with people who are broken and don't believe the same way as you. So this retreat response is fundamentally at odds with our call to follow Jesus, and the retreat escapist thing is something to confess.
Absolutely. And again, remember that either of these, this is not crazy. There's nothing wrong with you.
Yeah.
You're not broken because you feel the pull in any of these directions.
Yeah.
God wired these things into us for a reason. There are times when it's appropriate. And then this last one, we just went over, assimilation. Man, inertia works on human spirits, not just on a bowling ball. It just rolls to a stop and it's going to stay there. We're going to get to a space where we're relatively comfortable, right? Where Josh is, Josh, I just love that part. How can I just get through this and just anesthetize myself? Just so I don't feel it. It's not that bad. It's not that bad. But what am I doing here? So all of us have got one of these, or maybe all three, in a given day. And so we've got an opportunity here. The band's going to play, and we're going to invite the board members up. Board members, come on up.
Yeah.
And this is an opportunity for you to reflect. So let's engage in a little bit of a monastic practice right now.